Hey everyone, it's Tanya Meisenholder from the 30 by 30 initiative. Thanks for joining us today for our February webinar. Today, we're going to be talking with representatives from RTI International about some work that we're doing on police officer retention. So we have a few folks with us today. We have Jenn Rineer, Carlee Ruiz, and Zollie Saxon, who will introduce themselves as they speak. But we've been working together for a while now, really trying to understand the reasons why police officers are not remaining in agencies. And 30 by 30 is fortunate to have been able to identify some agencies to work with RTI on this project. And you'll have an opportunity to hear much more about it from the team in just a few minutes. A few reminders, if you don't mind, please keep your phones muted so that we don't inadvertently record anything you don't want us to record. As I mentioned, we are recording and this will be available on our website in about a week after the recording. Also, it's just some news about 30 by 30. It is Women's History Month next month, so we're gearing up for that. We'll be sending out some social media assets to all of you that are our partners on 30 by 30, and we hope that everyone is going to be celebrating women in law enforcement for the foreseeable future, and especially next month. And International Women's Day is Saturday, March 8th. I have to look at my calendar because there's so many things up there to remember. So, hopefully you can join us in that. And then also, as part of the work that we have done with RTI on retains, we did a short survey with some of our 30 by 30 agencies, which I think Jenn will talk about in this project. That will also be made available on our website in the near future as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team and let you get started.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Tanya, and for your partnership on this project and other efforts. We really love working with you. Thanks to all of you for being here today. We're really excited to talk to you about this topic, which is leveraging existing data to retain and support your workforce. And as Tanya mentioned, these are insights from our project, which is called Real World Engagement and Turnover Analysis to Inform New Solutions or Retains, which is an evidence-based policing workforce study. Again, my name is Jenn Rineer. I am the director of the Workforce Wellbeing and Effectiveness Program at RTI International. So we study all sorts of different police workforce issues, including occupational stress and health and staffing issues like recruitment and retention, like we're going to be talking to you about today. So really happy to be here. And I'm quickly going to turn it over to my two colleagues, Carlee and Zollie, to introduce themselves before we jump into it. Carlee?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Carlee Ruiz. I am a researcher with RTI International. I am a researcher within the policing research program, and I have a background in law enforcement. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Zollie.
Thanks, Carlee. Hi, everyone. My name is Zollie Saxon. I'm a research psychologist at RTI. I work in the Workforce Wellbeing and Effectiveness group. Most of my work has been around recruitment, retention, and policing. Prior to coming to RTI, I was a test validation specialist with City of Dallas, so I've been working with police and firefighters most of my career. I'll toss it back to you, Jenn.
Great, thank you so much. And I saw Tanya said if there are questions to go ahead and put those in the chat. So we do not mind being interrupted either in the chat or if you want to unmute yourselves at any point. We would love to hear from you and make sure that we're getting your questions answered. Next slide, please. So just to talk about what we're going to cover today, I'm going to talk about very briefly the background for this study, why we decided to do this in the first place, along with 30 by 30, and introduce the project. But today we're really going to focus on two sources of data that we've analyzed and learned a lot from in our project so far. And the reason that we're focusing on these two in particular, which is exit interviews and Glassdoor data, is because these are things that you likely have access to already for your agency, or others in leadership in different positions in your agency have access to. So as Carlee will talk about this more later, but Glassdoor, all of the information on there is publicly available. So if there's any information out there about your agency already, anybody can go look at those right now in real time. And as we learned from the survey, which Zollie is going to be speaking about later, that we did with all of the 30 by 30 agencies, we know that almost all of your agencies are conducting exit interviews. What the extent to which that data is being used is a little bit of a different story, but the data is sitting there, and we know from our project that there's really a wealth of information there. So we are excited to talk to you about hopefully steps that you can take in the near term to better utilize this data that's already at your fingertips. And we're also going to talk about a Q&A. So we will make sure to leave time for that, as I said, at the end. But if you want to interrupt us and ask questions along the way, that works great too. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I know that some of you, it's possible that you're in transit or working on multiple things at once, so no pressure. But if you are available, I would love to hear from you all in terms of what organization you're representing, what your role is within that organization, where you're located, if it's not obvious from the organization name, and then your favorite aspect of your job, if you want to just put that in the chat, or if anybody wanted to unmute. And those of you on my team can, and Tanya, you can answer this as well if you want to participate. Just try to get some early feedback and just have a sense of who's here with us today.
Well, I think you know my role, 30 by 30, but it is out of the NYU School of Law Policing Project, which some people don't realize. I'm currently on Long Island, New York, and the favorite aspect of my job is that I get to work with amazing coworkers like Harry that keep me company all day. No, really. What I love about my job is that I get to engage with so many folks in policing and learn so much about different aspects of policing. I was with the NYPD for almost 20 years, so working with a range of agencies is really enlightening and inspiring for me.
Thank you, Tanya. Anyone else want to put in the chat? Any thoughts about these questions? Feel free to do it later as well. One of the reasons that I wanted to start with what your favorite aspect of your job is that I think that sometimes there's a perception, especially around exit interview data or data that's posted publicly on review sites like Glassdoor, that it's just the views of disgruntled employees complaining about things, right? And one of the other things that's really important that we've learned from this project is that there's a lot of positive information in these reviews too, including in the exit interviews, right? And Zollie will get into this more again later. You know, in this presentation, we're focused on a couple certain aspects of the exit interview data, but some agencies explicitly ask, like, what is the thing that you most liked about your job or your organization? And there's a lot of information there. And one of the things that agencies can do to help retain people is to think about, are there ways that we can create more space for the things that people really love, or to highlight those things, right? Sometimes it's as easy as creating space to talk about the things that people really value and make sure that that's front of mind and sort of balances out the aspects that are a little bit more stressful. And I see that people are starting to put some information in the chat, so I really appreciate that. And of course, you know, I will add the caveat, like, we know it's not easy to make organizational changes. And, you know, I don't mean to suggest that, okay, you just snap your fingers and you talk about the good things and then everything is fine, right? But we do know from the research that it is a balance, right? Like, there are things that keep people engaged and keep them, you know, wanting to stay at the agency. And there's always going to be things that are stressful. And sometimes the stressful things just take up all of the space, right? So learning from employees, you know, from talking to them, but also through these data sources. And again, just finding ways to maybe create even just a little bit more space for those positive things in the jobs can make a big difference. This is great. Thank you guys so much for putting this in the chat. Getting feedback, good and bad. This is awesome. It looks like we have the right people in the room for this, for sure. Being part of the hiring process, influencing and developing officers. This is great. It's wonderful to hear what you all love about your jobs, and whether you think of them this way or not, these are your retention factors, or at least some of them, right? These are the things that keep you coming back day after day. Thank you all for sharing this, and I look forward to reading these more in the chat. Like everybody, I'm not great at multitasking, so I'll focus on the slides and moving through it for the next couple of minutes, but I look forward to reading these. Thank you. Carlee, next slide, please. So just switching back to the impetus for this study in the first place. So, you know, it's not news to anybody in this room that voluntary turnover in policing has increased steadily over the last 15 years or so, with increased severity since 2020. You all are living this, right? The staffing shortages that continue. You know, there have been some advancements made in some agencies that are starting to kind of rein things in terms of, seeing less people go out the door and getting more people in. But we know that it's still a big issue for most agencies across the country. And yet, at the time that we wrote the proposal to conduct this study, retention was one of the least researched areas in policing. There had been some studies, analyzing the existing research or talking to people about what are some of the factors that are stressful or that you don't like about your job, but really nothing was done on a large scale. And a lot that was out there was anecdotal, right? So a study of one agency, which of course is great for that one agency and helpful, but in terms of creating information that could be helpful nationally, it was really lacking. And there was almost nothing out there in terms of rigorous studies to actually identify and test solutions. So hopefully we'll do a future webinar where we'll share those parts of the study, but just know that the work that we're doing and presenting today is building on a bigger study where we're actually going to test some retention solutions in the agencies that we're working with. So as Tanya mentioned earlier, in our partnership with 30 by 30 in this work, we are working with a dozen 30 by 30 agencies from all across the country that are different sizes, different types, to serve as study sites for this project. And then, as Tanya also mentioned, there are some aspects of this work where we're engaging with all 30 by 30 agencies in some way. And the first instance of that was the survey that Tanya fielded for us to learn about what your current practices are around stay and exit interviews and what you're looking to get in terms of resources and things that would be helpful to you. And then other opportunities are things like this, where we can share those findings back to you and hopefully give you some information that you can take back into your daily work. Next slide, Carlee, please. So as I mentioned, this is a pretty big study. These components that we're talking about today are from our first phase, which was a very comprehensive landscape analysis where we've looked at data from these 12 agencies that we're working with, as well as some other data sources such as the academic literature and some other opportunities to look at this, to really understand the challenge and potential opportunities from different angles. So when we say that we're using both traditional and novel data sources, we're using Glassdoor, which hasn't been used much in research, although there's a lot to be learned from it. We're also looking at Reddit data, which is super interesting, and we would love to talk to you about that another time too. The reason we're not focusing on that today is that the Reddit stuff, it's a little less easy to implement yourself in terms of looking at your own agency's information and applying that, but really interesting stuff in Reddit in terms of law enforcement officers' perspectives of what they like about their jobs, what they don't like, why they're staying, why they're leaving. We conducted focus groups with officers and supervisors from these 12 agencies. So we're really trying to leave no stone unturned in terms of using the information that's available to us to look at this. And like I said, we have a whole bunch of other phases coming after this, including some surveys, some forecasting using administrative data. So just stay tuned for hopefully future webinars where we'll be talking about all the rest of that. Next one, Carlee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zollie and then Carlee, who are really going to get into the meat of this in terms of what we're learning from the exit interview analysis and the Glassdoor analysis and what you all can use can do with that data. Zollie.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So as Jen mentioned, this study did utilize novel data sources to examine retention. But we also examined that gold standard, so to speak. That would be exit interviews. Next slide, please. So in order to do this, we collected exit interview data from 11 of our partner agencies. And while we expected some variation in formatting and content, we actually found quite a wide variety. Agencies utilized many methods to collect their data, including traditional surveys with like multiple choice or check all that apply options. But some agencies actually included like open-ended response styles, such as, what did you like most about working for your agency? Sorry, excuse me there for a second. More differences occurred when we were looking at the form in which the data itself was collected or stored. Some agencies had handwritten PDFs that they scanned into the computers, like you see here. Others utilized online survey platforms, so their exit interview data came to us in spreadsheets. The majority, however, regardless of the questions that were, if the questions were multiple choice or check all that apply or open-ended, came to us as scanned copies of written documents, meaning they were most likely stored as paper forms. The questions asked also varied quite a bit within the agencies. Some agencies only requesting some of that initial surface level information, such as the professional factors like tenure, position, shift, supervisor name, etc. And others provided a variety of questions around different things that may impact retention, such as satisfaction with their supervisor, their insights into their department's culture, or how the department itself may improve. All agencies, though, ask the question, why someone left their organization. Next slide, please. So given that huge variety that I spoke about, and the type of response options available and overall lack of similar topics, we focused on that reason for leaving question. We further split this data into two categories: closed-ended responses, so again, the check all that apply or multiple choice options, and open-ended responses. And we'll touch first on the closed-ended responses, and then I'll talk to you a little bit later about the open-ended. But with the closed-ended responses, our teams codified the reason for leaving into categories or themes. And those are what you can see here. They're listed in order of most common reasons cited for leaving to the not least common, but the least common out of these themes. So at the top of this list, we see retirement, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll provide some clarity around the other themes. Under the theme of personal reasons, this included family reasons or other described personal reasons, and this can include things such as pursuing higher education, family circumstances, lifestyle preferences, and so forth. Pay and other benefits, of course, included pay, also included health benefits, and in some cases, the option of better benefits was listed. And so that was included in there. Work conditions focused on the nature of the work itself, such as responsibilities or common work tasks. Work conditions like the factors that the work was performed under, so like in an office or outside or on patrol, and then schedule as well. Social and culture included aspects such as relationships with coworkers and supervisors, as well as the culture of the organization on a whole. And there was also an other category that was presented. But in cases where that came up, there was often a please describe option later. So that was included in our open-ended response analysis. Next slide, please. When it came to the open-ended responses, however, we see a difference in the cited reasons compared to the ones on the previous slide. This isn't exactly a surprise, as closed-ended responses they have to rely on the way in which the question is asked. So they have to hope that they are asking about the factors most relevant to why someone is leaving. Open-ended responses allow for more open-ended, for example, allows for more elaboration on other factors that may have contributed to this. And closed-ended, if you don't ask those questions, you're not going to get a response to it. So that's something to keep in mind. If you make a survey of your own, it's probably best to have a mix of closed and open-ended responses. Analyzing open-ended data can come in many forms, some a little bit more time-consuming than others, such as manual review. With this data, however, we implemented the use of a language modeling AI called Mistral and Olama to analyze this text data. It's important to note that through RTI, we have a secure environment through our servers and databases to be able to analyze this data. And that's not to say that it's not an option for you, but I would greatly caution you from throwing your exit interview data into ChatGPT, for instance. The valid survey.
Yes. Oops, sorry, Zollie.
Yeah, no problem.
I just had a quick question about how you handled recruits. Were the exit interviews for recruits and employees? I know some agencies have both.
Yeah, so for some of the agencies, they would list the category. I believe only 2 of the agencies that we worked with had recruits included in there. So we were able to not weed them out, but filter them out in the process to only consider the folks who weren't still in their probation or still in the academy, because they would give us those designations. Now, if an agency didn't provide that, I can't say with 100% confidence that we're not including cadets, but I don't have it on me, but we do have some average tenure around the people who participated in their agency's exit interviews. And for the most part, it was between 3 and 5 years. I could provide.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption.
No, absolutely. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. So the valid survey responses in that open-ended area, we utilize prompts within that AI modeling. We use 2 approaches. One, reason for leaving. We prompted the AI model with In these survey responses, individuals in policing roles describe why they are leaving their position, summarize their reasons for leaving, respond in a concise paragraph, and do not include recommendations or unnecessary information. So that's what this slide here is talking about. I'll go ahead and give you the other prompts that we gave it, which I'll talk about in a secondary slide, which is we did ask the AI model also to give us recommendations for the agency by stating, please generate a concise and bulleted summary with recommendations. Organize the recommendations into a specific list, and so forth. So while analyzing the open-ended responses for, oh, I missed my slide thing. So if we're looking at this one here, this just gives that overall perception, taking all of that open-ended data and giving you that concise paragraph here. So they talk about some things around specific reasons for leaving, but also these are actionable things that you can move from. Maybe not all of them, but for example, lack of recognition or appreciation for skills and experience. That's something actionable. So even if it's coming from maybe a disgruntled employee, that doesn't mean that the information is completely unhelpful. Let's move to the next slide, please. So here it's where we had asked the AI to provide that bulleted list of recommendations based off the feedback in those open-ended responses. So while the AI will, or while those responses will have options showing those or summaries that include some of that maybe things that aren't actionable, there are ways to utilize that and process, again, actionable items coming from this. Sorry, 1 second here. My screen froze on me. So looking at this one here, these results indicated that there were some areas where this agency could improve. Carlee went forward too fast and I lost my place. I apologize, all of you. So, but what I want to say here, the takeaway between these two AI summaries is that I feel like this helps highlight how useful this information can be. But even if that's coming from a disgruntled employee who didn't have a great work experience, you can still provide steps forward based on that information. So I wouldn't just disregard it. And I am mindful of the fact that not everyone has access to AI language models. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we hope to help in that space to kind of lower the burden when it comes to analyzing those open-ended responses. Next slide, please. So to understand how and in what way agencies are currently using exit interview data, as Tanya and Jen both mentioned, we partnered with 30 by 30 and reached out to all of you to answer kind of this question. We had 160 agencies respond, so thank you for those of you who may be in here that filled out that survey. And from our respondents, 75% reported that their agency conducted exit interviews. However, only 22% knew how that data was, or knew that that data was used to inform policy or practice. Many were actually unsure how that data was being used or if it had a history of being used to inform policy or practice. Many respondents indicated that exit interview data was only reviewed as needed without regular frequency. And for agencies who didn't collect exit interviews data, they reported back a lack of tools and procedures or dedicated staff to be able to examine this. However, some also didn't believe that the findings were useful or actionable. But fret not, if you do not have the tools or procedures, one of the deliverables from this project is to provide exit and stay interview forms to agencies to help make this process as painless and easy to analyze as well as draw insights from as possible. Next slide, please. So we have to talk a little bit about why we should use them, regardless of, I think, the points been illustrated. Our research has shown us that thus far, with regard to exit interviews, they can provide valuable information around how agencies may improve and even what they're doing that resonates well with their staff. That being said, there's factors into how an exit interview is conducted that can determine the quality of information you receive from them. So first, again, how it's conducted, meaning specifically, is it collected in a multiple choice format? Is it a closed-ended format or an open-ended format? Who is collecting that data? Is it interviews with staff? Is it a survey that's fielded to groups anonymously? And then overall, kind of the rest of these 4 areas. So, sorry, my thing jumped again. This can affect how exiting employees perceive their exit interview process as well, whoever is conducting it. So for example, we had an agency indicate that they didn't have a formal exit interview process. They just went and talked to the chief after. So that may affect the quality of the information you get. Does the person who is the exiting employee feel that there will be repercussions if they say something bad? Do they feel safe offering that honest feedback? How will their data be used? If the agency isn't going to use it, is it worth the other risk of telling them, actionable items or honest feedback? And then how will that data remain secure? Is this going to follow them when they go to their new job? So these factors are paramount in eliciting honest feedback from employees, even those who were involuntarily terminated. So some recommendations that we have based on research in areas outside of policing would be to collect the data anonymously and through a neutral third party or platform where possible. Additionally, explain to individuals how their data will be used and who will have access to it. Now, something that can't be ignored is that exit interviews only tap employees who have left your organization. If you don't have a stay interview process or resources to create and receive feedback from current employees, that's where some of the novel data sources we mentioned at the start of this presentation come into play. And for that, I will turn it over to Carlee.
Thank you, Zollie. So yeah, I'm going to talk about kind of a little bit of what we found from the Glassdoor data from the 12 agencies that we looked at, and then how you, as for your agency, how you can use it. So first, if you're not familiar, Glassdoor is a website for job seekers, employees, and employers to share their experience in the workforce. This website allows individuals to post their salary ranges for their positions, post what benefits they receive, and review their experience working for a particular company. Job seekers can also post about their experience with the hiring process they had, and employers can post job openings and analyze and respond to reviews that are given for their company's pages. Now, there are over 2.5 million employer profiles, over 55 million monthly visitors to the site, and over 180 million reviews and salaries posted. So needless to say, Glassdoor is widely utilized and seen within the workplace sphere. It has a wealth of information for companies who are aware it's there. And it is highly likely that your own agency has a Glassdoor page, even if you haven't already looked at it. Now, what makes Glassdoor unique from other traditional feedback sources, such as the exit interviews that Zollie was talking about, and even employee surveys, is that these reviews are all anonymous. So this allows for more honest feedback than you may not have given if you did an exit interview or a company-wide survey. Now, typically with online reviews, there could be a bias where only really the extremes are shown. So usually people who have a really bad experience will post, or someone who has a really amazing experience will post a review. Now, Glassdoor actually has a kind of unique workaround for that. So for anyone who goes on Glassdoor and is wanting to look up any information on any company's page, especially like salary information or getting into specific reviews about a company or an agency, it requires them to post a review to be able to see that information. So that kind of helps get more at that middle of the road opinion, where they wouldn't have posted a review on their own normally, but to get information about other agencies or other companies, or just to get more information, they have to post a review. Now, one big thing of this is, it might be easy to dismiss kind of Glassdoor, but a lot of, actually 79% of recent job seekers depend on online information, and 34% even those said that internet was their single most important resource for their recent job search. So not only is it useful for looking at what your current employees are saying about your company, but it's also important to know what's on your Glassdoor. So for prospective recruits, knows what, hey, this is what they're seeing on their Glassdoor page, or that's what they're seeing when they're looking at your agency. So I'm going to kind of jump into what the Glassdoor page looks like and how you might look up your reviews. So this is the typical company page. So what you'll typically see up here will be your agency name. And they have these individual tabs up here. The reviews tab is right there. So those are reviews posted both by former and current employees. And so, that's typically where you can see. There's also, of course, other things about, salary ranges that are posted, the interview process. You can also look that up there as well. So next. So for our study purposes, we looked across 12 law enforcement agencies on their Glassdoor pages from 2017 to 2023. And we looked at about 557 reviews, which we averaged about 46 reviews for each law enforcement agency. Now, some agencies that were bigger had a lot more reviews, while smaller agency had less. But yeah, on average, it was about 46 reviews per agency. Now, when you hop onto your Glassdoor page and look at the reviews, this is kind of what a typical, like I have two reviews here, one that's positive and one that's like more of a negative review. First is this overall star rating that it's circled here. So typically what they're asked to in the review is like, hey, for this company overall, would we rate it 1 to 5 stars? And so that's posted on the top. You also can post a breakdown of sub-ratings. So we see work-life balance, culture and values, diversity and inclusion, career opportunities, compensation benefits, and senior management. So most of the time, people, when they're posting review, do leave ratings that these Glassdoor gives them. Sometimes it's not required. So, but kind of gives them more of a breakdown of why they're giving them that certain star rating. Each reviewer gives a title to their review, kind of giving an overall view of what they're going to say. They also can post their job position. Now, this is not required, so they can just kind of leave it anonymous, but a lot of them do actually post what job field that they came from, and then they can also indicate whether they're a current or former employee, and then indicate how long they've worked for this company or agency. They will, Glassdoor does ask it's kind of a checkbox question of whether you recommend working for this company. Do you approve of the CEO? Which Glassdoor does post on their page of who's the current CEO, or for law enforcement agencies, current chief, current sheriff. And then business outlook, which is based, do you see that a positive business outlook for this company, which doesn't really is applicable for law enforcement agencies. And then lastly, for the review is a just open-ended question of what are the pros of working for this agency, what are the cons, and then what advice to management would you give? And it is required that at least something is filled out for pros and cons. Now, of course, people might not fill out completely or just leave it, kind of just say nothing to say. But oftentimes when we look through all those 557 reviews, someone had something to say to some extent. So breaking it down from the fields that we could, a lot of our findings, we ended up splitting up between sworn and non-sworn, and less than 10 years of employment versus 10 years of employment. So we found from our respondents, 56% of them indicated some sort of sworn position, 33% indicated some sort of non-sworn, and 11% didn't specify their job title. So we found that most of the people did actually post some sort of job title that we could use. Now, for years of employment, there was a little less response. We found 34% were less than 10 years, 26 had more than 10 years, but majority didn't actually quite specify their length of employment they had with that agency. So now looking over a breakdown of that overall star rating and those sub ratings that Glassdoor gives across the 12 agencies, this is what our overall ratings were. So you can kind of see that, the biggest one, we're looking at, career opportunities, competent benefits, and DEI, but our lowest ratings are more work-life balance and senior management. Now, we wanted to take a deeper dive when we look at these ratings and seeing how the different, how sworn and non-sworn, and depending on how long you've employed, whether these will change your ratings. So we did see, well, one of our key findings is that we found for non-sworn positions scored significantly lower than their non-sworn counterparts in terms of career opportunities. So again, this kind of suggests that non-sworn employees may feel like they don't have as much, they're limited in their career advancement than their sworn counterparts. Now, interestingly enough, on the opposite side, we found that non-sworn were more likely to rate their senior management opportunities and work-life balance higher than their sworn counterparts. So maybe this indicates that sworn personnel may not feel as supported by their senior management as much as their non-sworn personnel, and maybe they don't feel as control on how much their work life bleeds into their personal life, especially when compared to non-sworn personnel. And then we wanted to take a look at that less than 10 years employed versus more than 10 years employed. And there was a lot of differences on how they rated things. We found significantly that those who were employed for less than 10 years generally rated their overall job satisfaction, career opportunities, compensation and benefits, and cultural and values lower compared to those who had been employed for more than 10 years. Now, some kind of theories around why this is so is that employees who are newer to their roles may have a different perspective or experience, especially in terms of long-term growth opportunities, the benefits they receive, and the alignment with their organization's culture and values compared to employees who've been on longer. Now, of course, on the other hand, those who've been part of the agency for longer just may be more satisfied and be more confident in these areas and have just greater experience overall and stability of these roles because they chose to stay longer. Again, another note is as those who have more than 10 years of experience, they might be getting closer to approaching for retirement and moving on to other life stages. So the reason they were leaving or looking at or wanting to look at Glassdoor or look at other reviews might be not related to job dissatisfaction, but more just pursuing other opportunities after they retire. But again, looking at all these different ratings and looking at the different breakdowns of who's responding can be beneficial for your organization and for your agency, and at least getting some different perspectives based on sworn and non-sworn status versus in years of employment. Then lastly, we took a look at that open-ended question, those pros and cons. So overall, across the 12 agencies, we found that the top 5 pros that were mentioned were benefits. So that includes insurance, retirement matches, that kind of health insurance. Second is growth. So the ability to promote or change units. So the ability to get to a manager or the ability to change squads or, join a special task force. The top 3 was pay. The fourth one was peers. So the relationship with their coworkers, they got along with their squad mates, so they got along with their fellow team members. And lastly, meaningful work. So a lot of times the pros were mentioning is that they felt like they were making a difference. They felt like, their work had meaning, that they, the day-to-day, they just felt like they were impacting their community. Now for cons, the top 5 that were mentioned, the big one was supervisors. A lot of different complaints about management style, nepotism, certain command staff or sergeants, making things difficult for them to do their job. The second one was environment. So work environment, work conditions. A lot of this was involving around the equipment that they were given, how updated their technology that they had, and of course, kind of like the daily hard work that it is, especially to be like a patrol cop or, other sworn position. The third one was schedule. So what is their scheduled hours? What's their rotation? Was a big one that was mentioned. Again, pay for certain agencies was also a negative. And then lastly was their workload, was a lot of times mentioning, going to call and having no break, feeling like the staffing levels, they couldn't keep up, and just being overwhelmed with the amount of tests that they had to do. So we also took a look at the pros and cons. We took a look at differences between sworn and non-sworn. So for non-sworn employees, instead of supervisors being top 1, it was pay. So most frequently mentioning that pay was their primary concern. And then we also took a look at we took a look at differences in agencies. So we saw agencies that overall rating was higher than a 3.3, which was like our average. We found that meaningful work stayed in the top 5, but if it was below that 3.3, we found that overtime kind of replaced that. So for agencies that kind of didn't have that higher overall rating, we found that that meaningful work connection that felt like I was making a difference wasn't mentioned as often, and was mostly the time of like, oh, there's a lot of overtime. great for, getting some extra pay. Now for the top cons when comparing to agencies that were rated overall higher, pay usually was listed as a top con, but for agencies that were rated lower, it was morale was a top con. So it kind of seemed like if overall the rating for that agency was lower, people kept mentioning the morale was low, it doesn't feel like this department's going anywhere or is growing. And if at least the overall rating for the agency was higher, then pay kind of grew up a more of like, there are more concerns around pay versus the overall morale of the department. So yeah, I think looking at your Glassdoor reviews is definitely can give a nice snapshot of your different agency, because even across different agencies, some of these top pros, top cons changed. And so it's really a great source for you to be able to get like specialized, reviews and looking at snapshot of your specific agency. Now, how can you go to Glassdoor and look at your info? So sometimes Glassdoor does actually provide a top review highlights by sentiment. So they kind of do some of this collecting for you of highlighting what things are being said about your agency, highlighting key words. A great pension was mentioned in 44 reviews for this agency, and same thing for cons. And they also, that's special, is rating by demographics. So when you're looking at the review, you can, if the person indicates their job position and their years and whether they're current and former employee, that's about all you can kind of break it down as. But Glassdoor has access to the backend data where if someone chooses, they can indicate their veteran status, whether they're a parent, any sort of disability. And then on this end, Glassdoor will actually give you a breakdown of ratings based on these different positions. So you can kind of take a look at about how, based on veteran status, how are they rating your agency? And so those are it's pretty simple to log in and see your reviews. We kind of grabbed some of the top quotes we saw from these Glassdoor reviews. And so, this is kind of what they look like. There's not all negative. There's usually, even if the negative is large, they usually always had some sort of pro to say. And a lot of them, they did have some constructive feedback on what made them upset, or, how they wish the agency could move in the future, or a lot of pros that kind of highlight the things that you can keep moving forward with. So yeah, Glassdoor is a great resource for you all to use, and it's available right now. So as you're getting maybe your exit survey set up, you can look at this in the meantime. And that's all I have. So I'm going to pass it off to Jen.
Thank you, Carlee. Appreciate the overview. That was great. So yeah, just to wrap it up with a couple highlights before we move into some more Q&A. So again, you've heard us say it a few times. I mean, we really encourage you or those in a position to really utilize and this data for decision making to look at the reviews. And Glassdoor isn't the only site. There are other places where people are posting anonymously online. And again, it's out there for the public to see. So it's good to be aware of what's out there, both good and bad. We encourage you to tell more people to review the agency, right? Like some agencies only have a couple of reviews, and it's interesting. I think sometimes people think, well, there's only a couple of reviews for my agency's small, but sometimes when there's only a few reviews, the ones that are on there stand out even more, right? Because it's like if there are thousands of reviews, then somebody could read something and think, oh, well, that's just one person. But if there's only a couple of things that for people to look at, sometimes it really highlights those particular sentiments. So encourage people to review the agency. I mean, especially if you or others, have a positive experience. We know recruitment and retention is as much about communicating all of the good things as it is about, dealing with some of the negative things that come up. And so, yeah, this includes you too. So if you haven't reviewed your agency, and now I'm thinking, have I reviewed RTI? I should probably go on there and then leave a review for RTI as well. We can all participate in this and provide, a more complete picture of the experience of work for other people. Stay tuned for our stay and exit interview templates. So, we've mentioned this a few times now. We are using Microsoft Forms to create versions of this that you can either use right from there Or, you can adapt that and put it in your own data collection tools or something else that your agency uses. But what we're trying to do is really synthesize the results of what we've learned and create a form that, is concise, because we know that it's time consuming to do these, but really hits at the key questions that are going to help you understand people's experiences and take that information and use it for positive change going forward. We're also looking for ways to, provide guidance for how to use that interview information for decision making, how to get some visuals based on that data, right? Pie charts and things like that, graphics that you can easily use and share to show, the most important things that your agency is experiencing today and tomorrow, and to look at trends. Another thing is just, feedback can be difficult, for anyone, for any organization, and is just to, keep an open mind about feedback. I can see from what some of you posted in the chat, I mean, you're already of this mindset, right? But in communicating with other people in the agency, I'm thinking about the point that Carlee raised, that of the reviews on Glassdoor, one of the top cons was people's complaints about their supervisors, right? And that can be really hard to hear for people in supervisory or leadership roles, and often most people anyway in those roles are doing their best to try to be supportive and to be effective. But one of the things that we've learned from this project and other work is just, in policing and in other industries, there's not a lot of training for how to be a supervisor, right? Like, people are taught, they sometimes become a supervisor because they're good at the core tasks of the job and they can teach people about those things, but often there's very little training and resources for actually developing to become a manager. And so it's sort of like, how can you think about this as a resource alignment thing, right? You wouldn't necessarily expect people to be exceptional supervisors if they have no training or background in that. So just to kind of foster that culture of feedback and sort of normalizing, yes, there are things that we can work on, and maybe we can put some more resources into supporting people and parts of the agency to be more effective. And I think that's all I had on this slide. I would like to open it up for some Q&A. If you all have questions for us about these two data sources or other broader retention issues, we'd love to hear everybody's feedback. And thank you so much for everything everyone put in the chat. It's so interesting to hear, where you all are coming from in terms of not just where you're located, but your role in your agency and what you really like about your job. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jen. I'll get us started. Carlee, Zollie, that was great. And, I've seen a version of it before, but I find it so intriguing, especially the Glassdoor part. It's not something that I would have ever thought to look at. And when y'all told me about it and I started looking, I was amazed at how much was actually in there for some agencies. Some way more information than I expected. But it was really interesting. So if you do have the resources, I think it's another good thing to add as an agency, even if you're, can't do it all the time, but to occasionally look in there. And I do think the newer generations that are coming into policing, they are looking at those things. And that is a source of information. We've heard from some women that we work with, especially with 30 by 30, that they go to those sources when they're making comparisons among agencies to get a sense of what the environment is like. Two other things I would like to just raise is there's not any good recent national stats on retention. So the latest statistical report that I'm aware of from the Bureau of Justice Statistics for nationwide police officer retention is from 2008. Jen, if you know of something more recent, please let me know. You do see things that sometimes academics will do in single settings, or you'll see something like the Police Executive Research Forum survey their agencies, but it's not at the same level as something you would see from the federal level. So there's a lot of missing information about retention rates among law enforcement employees. And Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you know this more than me.
I should. Well, what came to mind is the LEMIS survey, and I think that there is. I'm not sure where the field is at with this, but I believe RTI is involved in some of that implementation of that survey. I think that there are plans to do more of a recurring data collection, at least with a smaller subset of items, because it's by the time the data becomes available, it's 7 years old or whatever, and how helpful is that? But I'm not sure though what specifically is going to be asked on a more frequent basis. But I remember being hopeful, hearing okay, they're gonna change the way that is fielded so that the data is more timely.
about is like people's use of this. So Zollie mentioned some of the reasons that.
Tanya, I think it's a little hard to hear you all of a
Oh,
sudden.
how's that? Is
Oh,
that
good.
better?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry about that. So one of the things that Zollie mentioned was the reasons that some people might not want to do exit interviews. And that takes me back to my time at NYPD, because there were concerns over potential repercussions of filling out some of these surveys, especially for retirees, people that weren't necessarily resigning, but were leaving at the end of their tenure. I think, there's always questions about surveys and the veracity of that. And sometimes law enforcement agencies, officers can be hesitant or skeptical of survey results. But I think it's really important to garner this information as best you can, because there's really no other way to get at it. And part of what we see here is a validation of what is probably anecdotal information in the agency. So there's probably people in some of these agencies that very clearly know why some folks are leaving, but this exit interview data can help validate what the talk is. So that, I think that's a really important thing to mention with respect to this as well. And then one question, Jen, for you and your team, how well does this match up to the academic literature that you had a chance to kind of preview? Is it pretty consistent with the reasons why people are leaving?
Well, I would say, I don't know that we unearthed any brand new reasons that like people hadn't been thinking about before. But I think what we started to uncover in these phases of the project, and what we're moving towards in the stages that are forthcoming, is really being able to quantify in this large study of 12 agencies, of all the things that agencies could do to improve retention, what is the most important? So we are moving into a discrete choice experiment survey, which essentially will allow us to quantify. So from the exit interview and Glassdoor data, plus a bunch of other things that we did, we kind of narrowed it down to like the top handful of things that seem to be most important across all these data sources, right? So it's salary, it's how people, it's like perceptions of the promotional process, aspects of work-life balance. And the type of survey that we're fielding will actually allow us to quantify which is the most likely to actually affect retention, right? Because we know agencies have limited resources, bandwidth, you can't do everything at once. And that just hasn't been shown before. So, I mean, that's my perspective, is we're just sort of being able to quantify these things that had been looked at in a silo, to be able to say among these really what's driving things the most and where should agencies start and prioritize. But yeah, Zollie, Carlee, any other thoughts that you have about that?
I mean, I would say, as far like, most of the academic literature is not based in policing or law enforcement careers. It's based in consulting firms or business organizations. So it wouldn't have been a fair assessment before to say, like the old adage, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. I think that maps over perfectly to policing, but without doing the work that we've done, we can't like say that, okay, supervisors actually have a really, really big impact. And especially with the like job responsibility differences between law enforcement and other things. So like Jen said, it's nothing necessarily novel, but it's reinforcing the evidence base to show that these are the factors that are most important in policing. And that's where our research doesn't like contradict what's out there, but it may be more specific in order of importance within law enforcement versus in a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, and one other thing that I will add is, I think one of the main things we're contributing to this work is just identifying some of these different data sources that technology is allowing us to look at. So Reddit, for example, I mean, I'm not a Reddit person. I don't know if you all spend a lot of time on Reddit, but I mean, it's a mess. It's like a lot of garbage and weird stuff. And like, you can go down some weird rabbit holes, like looking at stuff on Reddit. I mean, so much of it. So we were looking for Reddit specifically at subreddits that are specific to law enforcement, where people have to have a verified law enforcement email address in order to post there. So you have, some confidence that you're at least getting information from the right people. But I mean, if you were just doing manual analysis, I mean, it would take years and years to comb through all of the irrelevant stuff, irrelevant to our research questions, I should say. to get to what's important. But because we were able to work with, our friends, I know Tanya, Emily Hadley, in data science, who know how to synthesize and analyze these huge volumes of data to really narrow it down to the specific, search terms, questions that we're trying to answer. We found out like there's a lot of interesting information on Reddit from verified law enforcement officers related to like their concerns of stress and safety and wellness. And so it's just interesting to be able to, I think, look at different methodologies for answering these questions, and like I said, different data sources and places to look that just weren't really possible before.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like you can't think about retention in my mind without considering recruitment. They go together. I mean, people sometimes like to separate them out, and I understand why. But if you know why people are leaving prematurely, then that has a real impact on your recruitment efforts. So that's one of the reasons that you really should be thinking about that. And as especially as supervisor, I saw a number of you that are sergeants in recruitment areas, like you should know like how many people are leaving your agency and when in their career are they leaving. I had a colleague recently who went to an interview, and her question for the people that she was interviewing with at the end was, what is your retention rate and why do people leave your organization? And that's a great question to give you a sense of what that workplace environment is like. Does anyone else have any questions for the RTI team today? Or anything to add about like what you know about retention in your agencies, or that you'd be willing to share with us? We'd love to hear. All right, I think we have a quiet group today. Jen, it happens.
It's all good. I know I'm bad at thinking of questions on the spot. Not that you guys are bad at thinking of questions, but a reframe for that is sometimes I think of questions later. So if you think of questions later, feel free to contact us. I think I failed to bring up the last slide that had my email. So if you email me, you can reach, let me stick it in the chat. Any of us on the project team. I should also mention we are part of a larger team of about, 10 people who contribute to this work. So we have folks who specialize in data science and, behavioral economics type surveys and things that are making all this possible. So just a shout out to the whole team. And of course, the 12 agencies that we're working with. We didn't list them here just because we're trying to be, sensitive to everyone's data and things that's, we didn't want to put anybody's data on blast, but the set of agencies we're working with is fantastic, and they'll all be receiving an agency specific report with all the findings. So just really appreciate the partnerships and are thankful to be doing this work with you all.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the largest study that's going on right now around police officer retention. So it's really exciting to see the results. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks Jen, Carlee, Zollie for being here. This is not the last time you will hear from the RTI team. We partner with them frequently because they do incredible work. And we value that partnership, as well as our 30 by 30 agencies that have joined. So as a reminder, this recording will be up in about a week. And I will also send out or upload the short document on the study findings that we did with our 30 by 30 agencies in RTI. Jen, there is a question about whether you're willing to share the slides. You can let me know about
Totally
that.
Fine.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. So we can upload those to our website as well. And then just a reminder, what I started with at the beginning of the conversation, Saturday starts Women's History Month. So I hope everyone really celebrates the women in law enforcement and all of those of you that are on the call and doing the really tough work that we know this job entails. And that is it for today. We will see you next time.